The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy streets of London as 23-year-old Sarah Mitchell made her way to the local grocery store. Her white cane swept rhythmically from side to side, guiding her through the familiar route she had walked countless times before. Sarah had been born with a rare condition that gradually took her sight by the age of 16, but she refused to let her visual impairment define her limitations. That Tuesday started like any other day for Sarah. She had her morning coffee, listened to the news on the radio, and prepared her shopping list using the voice recorder on her phone. The autumn air was crisp and she could hear the usual sounds of the city waking up: car engines humming, people chatting as they hurried to work, and the distant sound of construction from a nearby building site. Sarah lived independently in a small apartment just 3 blocks from the main shopping district. Her parents had initially worried about her living alone, but Sarah had proven time and again that she was more than capable of taking care of herself. She had learned to navigate the city using various techniques taught at the rehabilitation center, and her other senses had become remarkably sharp. As she approached the intersection near Regent Street, Sarah paused at the familiar crossing point. This particular intersection was always busy, with 4 lanes of traffic coming from different directions. She had crossed it hundreds of times before, always waiting for the audio signal that indicated when it was safe for pedestrians to cross. Standing at the corner, Sarah listened carefully to the pattern of traffic sounds. She could hear cars accelerating and braking, the hiss of bus air brakes, and the occasional motorcycle revving its engine. The crossing had an audio system that beeped when the pedestrian light turned green, but sometimes the sound was difficult to hear over the noise of traffic. On this particular morning, the construction work nearby was creating additional noise that made it harder than usual to hear the audio signals clearly. Sarah waited patiently, listening for the familiar pattern that would tell her when it was safe to cross. She heard what she thought was the crossing signal and took a confident step forward into the street. What Sarah didn't realize was that the sound she had heard was not the pedestrian crossing signal, but rather a piece of construction equipment that had made a similar beeping noise. The traffic light was still showing red for pedestrians, and cars were moving at full speed through the intersection. Just as Sarah's foot touched the asphalt of the busy road, a strong hand firmly grasped her arm and pulled her back onto the sidewalk. The sudden contact startled her and she nearly lost her balance as someone guided her safely back to the curb. "Miss, please be careful," said a deep, calm voice with a distinct British accent. "The light hasn't changed yet. You are about to step into moving traffic." Sarah's heart was racing as she realized what had just happened. She could hear the sound of cars whooshing past just inches from where she had been about to walk. The realization that she could have been seriously injured or worse sent a chill down her spine. "Thank you so much," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I heard the crossing signal. The construction noise must have confused me." The man who had saved her remained beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. "It's quite all right, miss. Those construction sounds can be misleading. I'm just glad I was here to help." Sarah turned toward the voice, wishing she could see the face of her rescuer. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand in the direction of the voice. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sarah. I'm James," the man replied, gently shaking her hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and she noticed he was wearing what felt like leather gloves. As they waited together for the actual crossing signal, Sarah found herself curious about James. His voice had an educated quality to it, and there was something almost formal about the way he spoke. She could detect a subtle scent of aftershave and what might have been leather or metal, perhaps from clothing or equipment. "Do you work around here?" Sarah asked, making conversation while they waited. James paused for a moment before answering. "Yes, I work nearby. I was just finishing up my morning duties when I saw you at the crossing." The genuine pedestrian crossing signal finally sounded, and James gently guided Sarah across the street, staying close beside her to make sure she was safe. His presence was comforting, and she appreciated that he didn't try to take over completely. He simply stayed near enough to help if needed while still allowing her independence. "This is very kind of you," Sarah said as they reached the other side. "Most people just assume I know what I'm doing and don't pay attention." "Everyone deserves to feel safe when they're out and about," James replied. "Besides, I could tell you're quite capable. You just had a bit of bad luck with that construction noise." As they walked, Sarah noticed that James seemed to attract attention from other pedestrians. She could hear people whispering and what sounded like phone cameras clicking. This struck her as odd, but she didn't want to pry. "Where are you headed?" James asked as they continued down the street. "Just to the grocery store on the next block," Sarah replied. "I do my shopping every Tuesday morning. It's less crowded then." "That sounds like a smart approach," James said. "Would you mind if I walked with you? I'm heading in that direction anyway." Sarah was touched by his thoughtfulness. "I'd like that very much." As they walked together, Sarah found herself enjoying James's company more than she had expected. He had a warm sense of humor and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person, rather than focusing on her visual impairment. He asked about her interests, her work, and her experiences living in London. Sarah worked as a customer service representative for a telecommunications company, a job she could do entirely over the phone from a small office near her home. She told James about her love of audiobooks, her interest in cooking, and her weekly volunteer work reading to elderly residents at a nearby care facility. "That's wonderful," James said when she mentioned her volunteer work. "It sounds like you make quite a positive difference in people's lives." "I like to think so," Sarah replied. "I've learned that everyone has something valuable to offer, regardless of their circumstances." Their conversation was interrupted when they reached the grocery store, but something unexpected was about to unfold that would change both of their lives forever. As Sarah and James approached the entrance to the grocery store, Sarah noticed an unusual amount of activity around them. There seemed to be more people than typical for a Tuesday morning, and she could hear the distinct sound of multiple car doors closing and engines idling nearby. "It seems busier than usual today," Sarah commented, adjusting her grip on her white cane. James cleared his throat softly. "Yes, there does seem to be a bit more activity than normal." What Sarah couldn't see was the small crowd that had begun to gather, drawn by the sight of James walking casually down the street with her. Several people were discreetly taking photographs with their phones, while others whispered excitedly to each other. James appeared to be trying to ignore the attention, but Sarah could sense a change in the atmosphere around them. As they entered the store, the automatic doors sliding open with their familiar whoosh, Sarah heard the store manager's voice speaking in hushed, urgent tones to someone nearby. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone suggested surprise or concern. "Sarah," James said quietly, "I should probably mention something to you." Before he could continue, a woman's voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, sir," the voice said, and Sarah could tell it was directed at James. "I'm Emma Thompson, the store manager. We're absolutely honored to have you visit our store today." Sarah turned her head toward the conversation, puzzled by the manager's unusually formal tone and what seemed like excessive enthusiasm for a regular customer. "That's very kind of you," James replied politely. "I'm just helping my friend Sarah with her shopping today." The word friend made Sarah smile. In the short time they had known each other, she had already begun to feel a genuine connection with James. His kindness and respectful manner were refreshing, and she found herself hoping this wouldn't be their only encounter. "Of course, sir," the manager continued. "Please let us know if there's anything at all we can do to assist you both. Anything at all." As they moved into the store, Sarah could hear the manager speaking rapidly into what sounded like a radio or phone, though she couldn't make out the words. The whole situation was becoming increasingly puzzling to her. "James," she said quietly. As they walked toward the produce section, "Is everything all right?" The manager seemed very intense. James was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could sense he was choosing his words carefully. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about myself. I probably should have mentioned it earlier." They stopped near the apple display, and Sarah turned to face the direction of his voice. "What is it?" "I work for the royal household," James said simply. "I'm one of the Queen's guards." The words took a moment to register with Sarah. When they did, her eyes widened with surprise. "You mean, you're one of those guards who stands outside Buckingham Palace?" "Among other duties, yes," James replied. "I was actually on my way back to the palace after completing some errands when I saw you at the crossing." Sarah felt a mix of emotions wash over her. Surprise, certainly, but also a touch of concern. "Oh my goodness," she said softly. "No wonder everyone's been acting so strangely. And here I was, just chatting away like you were any ordinary person." But I am just an ordinary person, James said firmly. The uniform doesn't change who I am underneath it. I'm still the same person who wanted to make sure you got across the street safely. Sarah appreciated his words, but she couldn't help feeling a bit overwhelmed by the revelation. I had no idea. I mean, I could tell you spoke nicely and seemed, I don't know, well-educated, but I never would have guessed. Good, James said, with what sounded like relief in his voice. That means you were talking to me as James, not as a royal guard. That's exactly how I hoped it would be. As they continued shopping together, Sarah became more aware of the attention they were receiving. She could hear whispers and the soft clicking sounds of camera phones. The store manager appeared periodically to check if they needed anything, always addressing James with an almost exaggerated politeness. This must be very unusual for you, Sarah said, as they selected some vegetables. I mean, shopping in a regular grocery store like this. More unusual than you might think, James admitted. We typically shop at designated stores or have items delivered. But I enjoy doing normal things when I can. It helps me remember what life is like for most people. Sarah found herself impressed by his humility. Despite his prestigious position, James seemed genuinely down to earth and interested in ordinary experiences. As they moved through the store, he proved to be a helpful shopping companion, describing items to her when she asked and offering to reach things from high shelves. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they waited in line at the checkout counter. Of course. Why did you help me at the crossing? I mean, you must have been in a hurry to get back to work. James was quiet for a moment before answering. I saw someone who needed help and I was in a position to help. It's as simple as that. The fact that you happen to be visually impaired wasn't really the point. Anyone stepping into traffic needs assistance. But surely you must have protocols about this sort of thing? About interacting with the public while you're in uniform? I wasn't actually in full uniform, James explained. I was in what we call plain clothes for the errands I was running. But you're right that there are generally protocols about public interactions. As they reached the checkout counter, the cashier's hands were visibly shaking as she scanned their items. She kept glancing up at James with a mixture of awe and nervousness. Good morning, James said pleasantly to the cashier, which only seemed to increase her flustered state. Sarah couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for the young woman, who was clearly overwhelmed by the unexpected celebrity encounter. It's all right, Sarah said gently to the cashier. He's really quite nice once you get to know him. This comment made James chuckle, and even the cashier smiled a bit, seeming to relax slightly. As they prepared to leave the store, James turned to Sarah. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you, Sarah. You've given me one of the most normal mornings I've had in quite a while. The pleasure has been all mine, Sarah replied. Though I have to admit, I'm still processing the fact that I've been shopping with a member of the Royal Guard. Would you mind if I gave you my contact information? James asked. I mean, if you'd like to stay in touch. I understand if this whole situation is a bit overwhelming. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Despite the surprising revelation about his identity, she had genuinely enjoyed their time together and found herself hoping to see him again. I'd like that very much, she said, pulling out her phone to save his number. As they exchanged contact information, neither of them could have predicted how this chance encounter would soon become the talk of London, and eventually, the world. By the time Sarah returned to her apartment that afternoon, she had no idea that her morning encounter with James was already making waves across social media. Several people who had witnessed their interaction at the grocery store had posted photos and videos online, and the story was spreading rapidly. Sarah settled into her favorite armchair and turned on her laptop to catch up on some work emails. She used screen reading software that converted text to speech, allowing her to navigate websites and documents efficiently. As she worked, her phone rang with a call from her best friend. Katie? Sarah, you are not going to believe what I just saw on Instagram, Katie said excitedly before Sarah could even say hello properly. Good afternoon to you too, Katie, Sarah replied with amusement. What's got you so worked up? There are pictures of you all over social media. You're with some guy in what looks like the grocery store, and people are saying he's one of the Queen's guards. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped their shopping trip might have gone unnoticed, but apparently that had been wishful thinking. How did you know it was me? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Well, aside from the fact that I'd recognize you anywhere, you're holding your white cane in that distinctive way you always do. Plus, the caption on one of the posts mentions your name. Sarah, what on earth happened this morning? Sarah took a deep breath and told Katie the entire story. From the near accident at the crossing to their shopping trip and exchange of phone numbers. Katie listened with growing amazement. So let me get this straight, Katie said when Sarah finished. You almost got hit by a car, were saved by a member of the Royal Guard, went grocery shopping with him, and now you're apparently internet famous? It seems that way, Sarah said, feeling overwhelmed by the situation. Katie, what exactly are people saying online? Katie was quiet for a moment, presumably reading through various posts. Actually, Sarah, it's all really positive. People are calling it heartwarming and sweet. There's one video that someone took of you two talking in the produce section, and you can hear James describing different types of apples to you. People are commenting about how natural and kind he seems. That's a relief, I suppose, Sarah said. I was worried people might think poorly of him for, I don't know, not following proper protocol or something. Are you kidding? People love this story. There's already a hashtag trending. Royal kindness. And Sarah, some of these comments are really beautiful. People are talking about how this shows that beneath all the formality and tradition, the Royal Guards are real people who care about others. After hanging up with Katie, Sarah found herself thinking about James and wondering how he was handling the attention. She imagined that having their encounter go viral probably wasn't something he had anticipated when he decided to help her that morning. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from James. Hello, Sarah, I hope you made it home safely. I wanted to let you know that our shopping trip seems to have attracted some attention online. I hope you're comfortable with that. If not, I can arrange for the photos to be removed. Sarah smiled at his thoughtfulness. She typed back, Hi, James. Yes, I'm home safely, thank you. My friend told me about the social media posts. I'm okay with it as long as you are. Are you in any trouble because of this? His response came quickly. No trouble at all. Actually, my supervisors seem quite pleased with the positive attention. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime this week? Somewhere quiet, perhaps? Sarah felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach. I'd love to. I know a small cafe that's usually not too busy. It's called the Corner Bookshop Cafe. Perfect. How about Thursday afternoon around 3 p.m.? That sounds wonderful. See you then. Over the next few days, the story continued to gain momentum online. Sarah received several phone calls from journalists wanting to interview her, but she politely declined most of them. She did agree to one brief phone interview with a local radio station, mainly because she felt it was important to share a positive message about how people with visual impairments navigate the world. I want people to understand that I don't need to be rescued or treated like I'm helpless, Sarah explained to the radio host. What James did was exactly right. He saw someone in immediate danger and helped. Then he allowed me to continue with my normal routine. He treated me like a capable person who just happened to need a quick assist. The radio interview was well received and seemed to add another layer of positive messaging to the story. People began commenting not just about James's kindness, but also about Sarah's independence and positive attitude. Thursday afternoon arrived, and Sarah made her way to the Corner Bookshop Cafe. It was a cozy little place tucked away on a side street, known more to locals than tourists. She had chosen it specifically because it tended to be quiet and would give them a chance to talk without drawing too much attention. She arrived a few minutes early and settled into a corner table, ordering her usual coffee and waiting nervously for James to arrive. Despite their easy conversation during their first meeting, she found herself feeling butterflies about this planned encounter. James arrived right on time, and Sarah could hear him speaking briefly with the barista before making his way over to her table. He was clearly trying to keep a low profile, but she could still sense a few people in the cafe taking notice of his presence. Hello, Sarah, he said warmly as he sat down across from her. I hope I didn't keep you waiting. Not at all, I just got here myself, she replied. How has your week been? I imagine it's been a bit unusual, James chuckled. That's certainly one way to put it. I've never had my shopping trip analyzed by the press before, but honestly, most of the attention has been positive. My colleagues have been quite amused by the whole thing. I'm glad you're not in trouble, Sarah said. I keep worrying that I might have caused problems for you at work. Quite the opposite, actually. The Palace public relations team is thrilled. They say it's exactly the kind of story that shows the monarchy in a good light. Approachable, caring, connected to real people. They talked for nearly 2 hours, and Sarah found herself even more impressed with James than she had been during their first encounter. He was intelligent, well-read, and had a wonderful sense of humor. He asked thoughtful questions about her work and her experiences, and shared stories about his own life and career. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said as they prepared to leave. "Of course. Before this week, when was the last time you just sat in a cafe and had a normal conversation with someone you just met?" James was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Honestly, I can't remember. Most of my social interactions are either with colleagues or at formal events. This is refreshing." As they walked out of the cafe together, James offered to walk Sarah to the bus stop. As they made their way down the street, Sarah realized that something special was beginning to develop between them, something that neither of them had expected when they first met at that busy intersection. What she didn't know was that their coffee date had also been noticed, and the story was about to take another surprising turn that would capture the attention of people around the world. 3 weeks after their coffee date, Sarah's life had taken on a surreal quality that she was still trying to adjust to. The story of her friendship with James had evolved from a simple social media post into an international news phenomenon. Major newspapers across Britain, America, and beyond had picked up the story with headlines like "Royal Guard's Act of Kindness Touches Hearts Worldwide" and "A Modern Fairy Tale." When royal duty meets personal connection. Sarah had been invited to appear on several television shows, most of which she had declined. She preferred to maintain some privacy and normalcy in her life. However, she had agreed to one interview with the BBC, primarily because they had assured her they wanted to focus on the positive aspects of the story and raise awareness about visual impairment. The morning of the BBC interview, Sarah felt more nervous than she had expected. She had chosen to wear a simple blue dress that Katie had helped her pick out, and she spent extra time making sure her hair looked neat. James had sent her a text message that morning wishing her luck and reminding her that she should just be herself. The interview took place in a comfortable studio setting, with Sarah sitting across from presenter Amanda Wells, known for her warm interviewing style. The lighting was soft and the atmosphere felt relaxed despite the cameras. "Sarah," Amanda began, "when you left your apartment that Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago, did you have any idea that a simple trip to the grocery store would change your life?" Sarah smiled, feeling some of her nervousness fade away. "Not at all. I was thinking about what I needed to buy for dinner, and whether I had remembered to put my shopping list in my phone. It was just another ordinary day." "Tell us about that moment when James stopped you from stepping into traffic." "It happened so quickly," Sarah recalled. "One moment I was stepping forward thinking I had heard the crossing signal, and the next moment someone had pulled me back to safety. My heart was pounding because I realized how close I had come to serious danger." "What was your first impression of James?" "He had such a calm, reassuring presence," Sarah said thoughtfully. "His voice was kind, and he didn't make me feel embarrassed about the mistake. He just wanted to make sure I was safe. At that point, I had no idea who he was just a stranger who had been willing to help." Amanda leaned forward slightly. "When did you realize he was a member of the Royal Guard?" "Not until we were in the grocery store and the manager started acting very formally around him. Even then, it took me a while to process it. I kept thinking there must be some mistake. How did that revelation change things for you?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Initially, I was a bit intimidated. I mean, you don't expect to become friends with someone who works at Buckingham Palace, but James made it clear that he wanted to be treated like any other person, and honestly, that's exactly how he behaves. He's just normal. Kind, funny, thoughtful, but normal. You've continued to see each other since that first meeting. How has that developed?" "We've become good friends," Sarah said, choosing her words carefully. "We meet for coffee, sometimes go for walks in the park. He's introduced me to some wonderful bookshops I hadn't discovered before, and I've shown him some of my favorite quiet spots in the city. We just enjoy each other's company. There's been speculation in the media about whether this friendship might become something more romantic." Sarah felt her cheeks warm slightly. "James and I are taking things one day at a time. We both value our friendship very much, and we're not putting any pressure on it to become anything other than what it naturally develops into." After the BBC interview aired, Sarah was surprised by the overwhelmingly positive response. The interview had been edited sensitively, focusing on the human interest aspects of the story rather than sensationalizing it. Comments poured in from viewers who found the story inspiring and heartwarming. More surprisingly, Sarah began receiving messages from other people with visual impairments who said her story had encouraged them to be more confident in their daily activities. Several parents of visually impaired children wrote to thank her for showing that independence and normal relationships were possible. James called her that evening after the interview aired. "You were wonderful," he said warmly. "You came across as exactly who you are, intelligent, articulate, and genuine." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "I was so nervous, but Amanda made it easy." "Have you seen the response online?" "Some of it. It's been very positive from what I can tell." "Sarah, I wanted to ask you something." "What's that?" "Would you be interested in attending a charity event with me next weekend? It's a fundraiser for guide dogs for the blind, and they've specifically requested that we both attend. They think our story might help raise awareness and donations." Sarah felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. "That sounds wonderful, but James, wouldn't that be quite public? I mean, attending an official event together?" "It would be, yes. And I want you to know that you don't have to say yes. But the cause is one that I think we both care about. And the organizers believe our presence might make a real difference." Sarah thought about all the messages she had received from people who had been inspired by her story. "I'd be honored to attend with you." The charity event was held at an elegant hotel in central London. Sarah had never attended such a formal function before, and she felt both excited and nervous as James picked her up in an official car. "You look beautiful," James said, as he helped her into the vehicle. Sarah was wearing a black evening dress that Katie had helped her choose, and she had spent the afternoon at a salon having her hair and makeup done professionally for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she said, smoothing down her dress nervously. "I feel a bit like Cinderella." "Well, if you're Cinderella, then I suppose that makes me your fairy godmother," James said with a laugh, which helped Sarah relax. The event was a revelation for Sarah. She met dozens of people involved in various charities supporting people with visual impairments, including several other individuals who were blind or partially sighted and living full active lives. She was introduced to guide dog trainers, mobility specialists, and advocates who were working to improve accessibility in public spaces. During the dinner portion of the evening, Sarah was asked to say a few words to the assembled guests. Standing at the podium with James beside her, she spoke about her experience and the importance of treating people with disabilities as capable individuals, who sometimes just need a helping hand. "3 weeks ago, I almost made a dangerous mistake at a busy intersection," she said to the attentive audience. "James helped me in that moment not because I'm visually impaired, but because I was a person in danger who needed assistance. That's the kind of world we should all strive to create, one where people look out for each other regardless of their differences." The speech received a standing ovation, and several major donors approached Sarah and James afterward to discuss additional support for vision-related charities. As the evening wound down, James and Sarah found themselves on a quiet balcony overlooking the London skyline. The city lights twinkled below them, and Sarah could hear the distant sounds of traffic and nightlife. "This has been an incredible evening," Sarah said. "I never imagined I'd be part of something like this." "You've been amazing," James replied. "The way you spoke to people tonight, the genuine connections you made, you have a real gift for making people feel comfortable and inspired." As they stood together in the cool night air, both of them realized that their relationship had moved into new territory. They were no longer just two people who had met by chance. They had become partners in something larger than themselves, using their unexpected story to make a positive difference in the world. 6 months after their first meeting, Sarah's relationship with James had evolved into something neither of them had expected, but both treasured deeply. What had begun as a moment of kindness had grown into a genuine romance that had captured the imagination of people around the world. Their relationship had developed naturally and privately, despite the intense public interest. They spent quiet evenings together at Sarah's apartment, where James would cook dinner while Sarah listened to audiobooks or worked on her volunteer projects. On weekends, they explored London together, with James describing architectural details and street scenes that Sarah couldn't see. While she introduced him to the city from a completely different perspective, Sarah had taught James how to navigate using sound and texture, helping him understand how she experienced the world around her. In return, James had opened up about the pressures and privileges of his position, sharing aspects of royal protocol and tradition that few people outside the palace ever learned about. The media attention had gradually settled into a more respectful pattern, while photographers occasionally captured them at public events or walking through parks. Most news outlets had adopted a policy of giving them space for their private relationship. This was partly due to James's position, but also because their story had generated such positive feelings that journalists didn't want to spoil it with intrusive coverage. One particularly meaningful development had been Sarah's involvement with several charities related to visual impairment and accessibility. Her natural speaking ability and authentic personal story had made her an effective advocate, and she had begun working part-time with the Royal National Institute of Blind People, helping to develop programs for young adults adjusting to vision loss. "I never expected to become a public speaker," Sarah told James one evening as they walked through Hyde Park. 6 months ago, I was nervous about ordering coffee in a crowded cafe. "You're a natural at it," James replied, guiding her around a cyclist who was approaching on the path. "People respond to your honesty and your optimism. You make them feel like anything is possible." "It helps that I have a good story to tell," Sarah said with a smile. "Meeting you changed my life in ways I'm still discovering." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Something in his tone made Sarah's heart skip. "What is it?" "My position comes with certain expectations and limitations that I've been thinking about a lot lately. If our relationship continues to develop, there will be protocols and procedures that we'll need to navigate. I want to make sure you understand what that might mean." Sarah had been wondering about this herself. She knew that relationships involving members of the royal household were subject to various rules and scrutiny. "What kinds of things are you talking about?" "Well, for one thing, any serious relationship I have needs to be approved by my superiors. There would be background checks, security briefings, protocol training. It's not exactly a normal dating process." "And have you spoken to your superiors about us?" Sarah asked carefully. James was quiet for a moment. "Actually, yes. I met with them last week." Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. "And? They're very supportive," James said, and she could hear the relief in his voice. "In fact, they think our relationship has been beneficial for the image of the royal household. They appreciate how you've handled the public attention with such dignity." "I'm glad they approve," Sarah said, though she felt a bit overwhelmed by the idea that their relationship was a matter of official consideration. "But James, how do you feel about all of this? I mean, having your personal life be subject to institutional approval?" "It's the world I've always lived in," James said honestly. "But Sarah, I want you to know that I wouldn't be pursuing this if I didn't believe it was worth navigating those complexities." "You mean too much to me?" His words sent warmth through Sarah's chest. "You mean a great deal to me too, James. More than I expected when that kind stranger pulled me back from traffic 6 months ago." A few weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected phone call that would change everything once again. The caller identified herself as Lady Catherine Pemberton, private secretary to a member of the royal family. "Miss Mitchell," Lady Catherine said in a crisp, educated voice, "I'm calling to extend an invitation on behalf of Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne. She would like to meet with you at Buckingham Palace next Tuesday, if you're available." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, did you say Buckingham Palace?" "To meet Princess Anne?" "That's correct. The princess has been following your story and your advocacy work, and she's expressed interest in discussing some of the accessibility initiatives you've been involved with. She's particularly impressed with your work on the new audio navigation system for London Underground stations." Sarah's mind was racing. She had been working with transport officials to improve audio announcements and tactile guidance systems in tube stations, but she had no idea that her efforts had attracted royal attention. "I would be honored to meet with Her Royal Highness," Sarah managed to say. "Should I? Is there anything special I need to know or do?" "James will brief you on the protocol," Lady Catherine said. "He's already been informed of the meeting and will accompany you to the palace. The princess is looking forward to it." After hanging up, Sarah immediately called James, who answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting for her call. "So you've heard about Tuesday?" he said without preamble. "James, I'm terrified," Sarah admitted. I don't know how to behave around royalty. What if I do something wrong? You'll be perfect, James assured her. Princess Anne is very down-to-earth and genuinely interested in the work you're doing. She's not looking for formality. She wants to have a real conversation about accessibility issues. But surely there are rules about how I should address her, where I should sit, what I should say. There are some basic protocols, yes, but nothing too complicated. The most important thing is to be yourself. That's exactly why she wants to meet you. The weekend before the palace meeting, James came to Sarah's apartment to help her prepare. He explained the basic etiquette, how to address Princess Anne as Your Royal Highness initially and then ma'am afterward, how to wait to sit until invited, and how to let the princess lead the conversation. What should I wear? Sarah asked, feeling overwhelmed by all the details. Something professional but comfortable, James suggested. You'll want to feel confident and like yourself. The navy blue suit you wore to the charity gala would be perfect. James, Sarah said as they sat together on her couch, can I ask you something honestly? Always. Do you think this invitation has anything to do with our relationship, or is it really about my work? James considered the question seriously. I think it's genuinely about your work. Sarah. Princess Anne has been a patron of disability charities for decades, and she's known for seeking out people who are making real differences in their communities. Yes, our relationship might have brought you to her attention initially, but she wouldn't waste her time with a meeting unless she thought you had something valuable to contribute. Tuesday morning arrived, and Sarah found herself in the back of an official car, traveling through the gates of Buckingham Palace. The experience felt completely surreal. 6 months earlier, she had been an anonymous customer service representative, and now she was about to have a private meeting with a member of the royal family. James met her at the palace entrance and guided her through several ornate corridors. Sarah could hear their footsteps echoing on marble floors, and could sense the grandeur of the spaces they were passing through, even though she couldn't see them. The room we're going to is called the 1844 room, James explained quietly as they walked. It's a smaller, more intimate space that the princess prefers for meetings like this. They were announced by a palace aide, and Sarah heard Princess Anne's voice for the first time, warm but authoritative, with the distinctive accent she recognized from television appearances. Miss Mitchell, how lovely to meet you, Princess Anne said, approaching Sarah and offering her hand. I've been following your work with great interest. Your Royal Highness? It's an incredible honor, Sarah replied, accepting the handshake and giving a small curtsy as James had taught her. Please, do sit down, Princess Anne said, gesturing toward what Sarah assumed were chairs arranged near a window. I understand you've been working on some fascinating projects with Transport for London. For the next hour, Sarah found herself in the most extraordinary conversation of her life. Princess Anne was remarkably well informed about accessibility issues and asked thoughtful, detailed questions about Sarah's work. She was particularly interested in the audio navigation system and wanted to understand how it could be expanded to other public spaces. The challenge, Sarah explained, is creating systems that provide enough information to be helpful without being overwhelming. People with visual impairments develop very sophisticated mental maps of familiar places, but when those places change or when we visit somewhere new, we need just the right amount of audio guidance. And how do you determine what the right amount is? Princess Anne asked. Testing, mostly. We work with groups of volunteers who have different levels. Sarah's heart began beating faster at the serious tone in James's voice. The car was moving smoothly through London traffic, but she felt as though the world had suddenly become very still around them. What is it, James? She asked softly. James took her hand gently in his. Sarah, these past months with you have been the most meaningful of my life. You've changed how I see everything, my work, my purpose. What really matters, Sarah squeezed his hand, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. I've been thinking about our future together, James continued, and I realize that I can't imagine my life without you in it. Not just as my friend or my partner, but as my wife. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. Sarah Mitchell, James said, and she could hear him shifting in his seat. Will you marry me? For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. The proposal she had dreamed of but never quite believed would happen was actually taking place in the back of a palace car after meeting Princess Anne. The surreal nature of her life over the past months seemed to crystallize in this perfect, impossible moment. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, James. Of course, yes. She felt him slip a ring onto her finger, a simple, elegant band that felt perfect against her skin. As they embraced in the back seat of the car, Sarah realized that their story had just taken its most extraordinary turn yet. James, she said as they held each other, did you plan this? I mean, did Princess Anne know you were going to propose today? James laughed softly. I may have mentioned my intentions when I requested permission to propose. Protocol, you know. Permission? Sarah pulled back slightly, suddenly remembering the institutional nature of James's position. It's just a formality for someone in my position, James assured her quickly. But yes, I needed official approval to propose marriage. And Sarah, they're not just supportive, they're thrilled. They think you'll be a wonderful addition to the royal household staff family. Over the next few hours, as news of their engagement began to spread, Sarah experienced the most overwhelming day of her life. James had arranged for them to visit both sets of parents to share the news in person before it became public, and Sarah was touched by how thoughtfully he had planned every detail. Her parents were overjoyed but also somewhat bewildered by the extraordinary turn their daughter's life had taken. 6 months ago, we were worried about you living alone and navigating the city safely, her mother said, tears streaming down her face. Now you're marrying a member of the Royal Guard and working with Princess Anne on accessibility projects. James's parents were more reserved, but clearly delighted. They had been concerned about their son's chances of finding love within the constraints of his position, and they welcomed Sarah warmly into their family. By evening, the engagement had been officially announced, and the story had exploded across international media. The headlines were everything Sarah and James could have hoped for. A modern fairy tale. Royal Guard and Vision advocate announce engagement and love conquers all. The couple that captured hearts worldwide takes next step. The response from the public was overwhelmingly positive. Social media filled with congratulations and well wishes from people around the world who had been following their story. The hashtag Royal Romance began trending globally, with people sharing their own stories of unexpected love and kindness between strangers. Most meaningfully to Sarah, she received hundreds of messages from people with visual impairments and other disabilities who said her story had given them hope and confidence. Parents wrote to thank her for showing their children that anything was possible, and young adults shared how her example had encouraged them to pursue their dreams. The wedding planning process was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. While she and James wanted a relatively modest ceremony, his position meant that certain protocols had to be followed. They would marry in the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace, with a guest list that included both their families and friends as well as various members of the royal household and representatives from the charities they both supported. Sarah worked with palace staff to ensure that the ceremony would be accessible not just for her, but for the many guests with disabilities who would be attending. Audio descriptions would be available for visually impaired guests, sign language interpreters would be present, and the venue would be fully wheelchair accessible. This might be the most accessible royal wedding in history, James said with pride as they reviewed the arrangements. 3 months later, on a beautiful spring morning, Sarah stood in the vestibule of the Chapel Royal, wearing a simple but elegant ivory dress designed specifically for her by a young British designer. Her veil had been a gift from Princess Anne, a family heirloom that the princess had worn at her own wedding decades earlier. As the music began, and Sarah took her father's arm to walk down the aisle, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. Less than a year ago, she had been an ordinary woman living a quiet life, and a moment of potential danger had changed everything. The ceremony itself was beautiful and deeply personal. Sarah and James had written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel as they promised to support each other through all of life's adventures and challenges. Sarah, James said as he looked into her eyes, you taught me that the most important act of service is simply caring for the person right in front of you. You've shown me that love doesn't require grand gestures. It lives in daily kindness, in paying attention, in being present for each other. Sarah's own vows were equally heartfelt. James, when you pulled me back from that intersection, you saved more than my life. You saved my belief that there are truly good people in the world who care about strangers. You've shown me that love can grow from the simplest act of human decency, and that the best partnerships are built on respect, friendship, and shared purpose. As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, Sarah knew that their story was far from over. They would continue their advocacy work together, combining James's platform and connections with Sarah's expertise and authentic voice. They had already been invited to speak at accessibility conferences around the world and to advise governments on inclusive design policies. But more than that, they had created something beautiful and unexpected, a love story that had captured hearts globally precisely because it began with such a simple human impulse. One person helping another in a moment of need. As they walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, Sarah could hear the applause and joy of their guests, and she knew that their accidental meeting had become something much larger than either of them could have imagined. They had shown the world that extraordinary love stories don't require extraordinary circumstances. Sometimes, they just require ordinary people choosing to be kind to each other. The reception was held in the palace gardens, with guests ranging from members of the royal family to Sarah's former colleagues from the telecommunications company where she used to work. The mix of people created exactly the kind of warm, inclusive atmosphere that Sarah and James had hoped for. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Scotland, Sarah and James stood together looking out over the garden where their guests were still celebrating. The fairy lights twinkled in the darkness, and Sarah could hear the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting through the night air. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been at that intersection that morning?" Sarah asked. James considered the question seriously. "I think we would have met somehow," he said finally. "Maybe not that day, maybe not that way, but I believe we were meant to find each other. I used to think that meeting you was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me," Sarah said. "But now I think the real luck was that we both chose to see our chance encounter as the beginning of something, rather than just a brief moment of kindness." As they prepared to begin their new life together, both Sarah and James knew that their story would continue to inspire people around the world. They had proven that love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, that kindness creates connections that transcend social boundaries, and that ordinary people can create extraordinary change simply by caring for each other with genuine hearts. Their accidental meeting had become a reminder to everyone who heard their story that paying attention to the people around us, offering help when it's needed, treating everyone with dignity and respect, and remaining open to unexpected connections can literally change lives in the most beautiful ways.